Hello and welcome to Digital Farm TV Rural News. I'm Andy Walker. The National Farmers Federation has welcomed a decision by the Federal Water Minister to respond to the NFF's calls for extra safeguards around the Sustainable Diversion Limit Adjustment mechanism within the Murray-Darling Basin Plan. Tony Burke has reversed his earlier proposal to grant final sign-off on the plan's adjustment mechanism to the Murray-Darling Basin Authority, according to NFF CEO Matt Liniger. A month ago, the government was expected to table amendments to the Water Act 2007, which proposed to give ultimate authority over the Murray-Darling Basin Plan's Sustainable Diversion Limit Adjustment mechanism to the authority, Matt Liniger said. At the time, the NFF said it questioned not only the decision to grant such responsibility to the authority, but also the decision to make such amendments without consultation with any key stakeholders, including the National and New South Wales Irrigators Councils. Despite a subdued growth outlook in some of the key wool-consuming countries during the 2012-13 season, growth prospects in emerging markets such as China and Russia offered a bright long-term outlook for Australian fine wool, according to a new industry report. Australian wool prospects, brighter times ahead for fine micron wool, released by agribusiness banker Rabobank, said the finer end of the wool market could remain challenged during 2012-13, particularly as growth remains slow in the major retail wool markets of Europe. In the longer term, the luxury boom in China and emerging interest from Russia had the potential to steal the limelight from traditional fine wool consumers in advanced economies, suggesting a much brighter outlook for the Australian fine wool industry, the report said. Despite a welcome improvement in Australian fine wool prices during the past month, the price premium for fine and superfine wool compared with medium micron wool remained historically low. Recently retired Oscot CEO David Anthony says Australia has always needed foreign cash to develop its agricultural industries. The industry veteran who built Oscot into Australia's largest cotton producer says our domestic investment sector is averse to farm forays, and without offshore cash, industries would stall.
You know, the ANZ's just released that new report there with the Port Jackson partners, and I think it spells out pretty clearly why we need capital investment from overseas. You know, if you just look at we've got a huge superannuation market with a huge amount of funds. Almost none of it's going into agriculture in Australia. So Australians have the opportunity to invest, but for some reason the investors don't want to go in there. So when you look at what the capital needs of agriculture are over the next few years, or decades, if we don't have that capital investment, there's going to be a serious sort of rundown.
Digital Farm TV will carry a 3-part series of interviews with David Anthony, looking at foreign ownership of Australian farms, the sexiness of agriculture as a career option, and the state of the cotton market in 2012-13. Weeds resistant to chemical herbicide glyphosate have been found off-farm along highways, railways and around buildings across Australia. Research led by Associate Professor Christopher Preston at the University of Adelaide as part of the Australian Government's National Weeds and Productivity Research Program has identified that herbicide resistance is far greater than originally thought. The research found that weed management practices on public lands were routinely adding to the risk of resistance, due largely to ignorance of the problem and alternative herbicides. Non-agriculture sectors where glyphosate was used exclusively for weed management had a high risk of resistance weeds evolving, Dr. Preston said. There was a need for accurate information on herbicide resistance and alternative management practices to be provided to weed managers in non-agricultural areas. New South Wales farmers have joined with livestock agents and peak industry bodies to oppose the introduction of mandatory electronic identification tags for sheep and goats. The move followed the release of a statement by the Standing Council on Primary Industries suggesting implementation of such a scheme was possible but would require a substantial investment of resources and funding from government and producers. The Australian Livestock and Property Agents Association joined with a group of industry bodies, including Wool Producers Australia, the Sheep Meat Council and Goat Industry Council, to support the current mob-based approach to traceability. Chair of the New South Wales Farmers Sheep Meat Committee, James Jackson, said Operation Tuckerbox, conducted by the New South Wales Department of Primary Industries, had clearly shown the current mob-based scheme for sheep and goat achieved excellent traceability standards. Individual electronic tagging was an unnecessary financial burden on industry, with no cost-effective benefit to biosecurity traceability, James Jackson said. Finally this week, climate change could lead to crops from the banana family becoming a critical food source for millions of people, a new report says. Researchers from the CGIAR Agricultural Partnership said the fruit might replace potatoes in some developing countries. Cassava and the little-known cowpea plant could be much more important food crops as temperatures rose. People would have to adapt to the new and varied menus as traditional crops struggled, according to the report's authors. They predicted that the world's three biggest crops in terms of calories provided, maize, rice and wheat, would decrease in many developing countries. Well, that's it for Digital Farm TV Rural News this week. I'm Andy Walker. Look forward to your company again next week.